Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're trying to cut through all the noise, the constant static of our world.
We are.
And we want to offer you a kind of shortcut, a direct path to something really profound.
Something that promises more than just like a flash of insight. It's about a real transformation, right?
Exactly, an aha moment that, and this is the key, is actually already living inside you.
Yeah, and we're not talking about, complicated rituals or some far-off spiritual quest you have to
Oh, no,
pause.
not at all. Our mission today really is to show you a robust, very accessible pathway to deep spiritual connection right here, right now.
In perhaps the most surprising place imaginable within yourself.
And our guide for this journey, she's a really pivotal figure in 20th century Christian mysticism.
That's right. A woman whose life was, well, quite short and mostly hidden away behind cloister walls.
But her legacy, it opened up this universal pathway to union with God for everyone, for all of us.
We're diving deep today into the spiritual world of St. Elizabeth of the Trinity. She was born Elizabeth Cates, lived from 1880 to 1906.
And she was canonized relatively recently, actually, by Pope Francis, back on October 16th, 2016.
It's pretty amazing when you think about it.
It really is. You have someone whose external life seems so, ordinary on the surface, contained within the walls of the Carmel of Dijon, yet her spiritual impact is just monumental. Pope John Paul II, he called her a brilliant witness to the joy of being rooted and grounded in love.
That's beautiful phrasing.
It is. So the question is, how does a life that seems so obscure, so outwardly simple, leave such a vibrant, lasting legacy? One that still resonates so much today.
Well, I think what's truly fascinating about Elizabeth, and this is key, is that her teaching, her doctrine, it isn't some, abstract, difficult thing just for nuns or theologians. The real purpose of this deep dive is to make the case, really, that her spirituality is incredibly practical. It's deeply scripturally grounded. And it's a robust pathway to contemplative union for all the baptized. Every single one.
So not just for people in monasteries.
Not at all. It's a way to transform literally every part of our daily lives, our mundane duties, our relationships, which can be complicated, even our deepest suffering.
Transforming it into what she called a continuous praise of glory.
Exactly. Laudum Gloria. A life lived totally from the inside.
So we're definitely not just talking theory here. This is about a tangible, actionable way to live differently, to find deeper meaning, deeper presence right now, wherever you are.
That's the goal. And to help us unpack all of this, we've gathered, a really good stack of sources for you.
Yeah, we've got a mix of detailed biographical accounts, some really insightful theological analyses, and practical applications too.
So you get a really comprehensive understanding of her message, which is, I think, both timeless and incredibly transformative.
Okay, so where do we start?
Well, to really get the depth and power of her spiritual insights, I think we first need to understand the ground her life grew out of, the context.
Quite old soil, as you put it. Okay, so let's unpack this. We'll start by exploring the really quite extraordinary life of this house of God.
Or, as she knew it, La Maison de Dieu.
Let's get into the formation of this mystic, the early years, 1880 to 1901.
Right. And one of the first kind of interesting details our research uncovered corrects a common idea. Lots of people think Elizabeth Cates was born in Dijon.
Oh, she wasn't.
No. She was actually born on July 18, 1880 at the military camp of Avre, which is near Bourges, not Dijon.
Ah, okay.
And her baptism happened very quickly, just 4 days later, July 22nd.
That detail, the military camp, it seems small, but it actually tells us something, doesn't it? Her early childhood was shaped by that transient military context. Moving around.
Yeah, instability in a way.
It's almost a paradox, isn't it? This early experience of an unsettled life might have subtly deepened her later, very profound understanding of an inner, unchanging home within the soul.
That makes sense. A real contrast to the settled life she'd eventually choose in Carmel.
And her early life was marked by another really significant event.
Yes, the sudden death of her father in 1887. She was only 7.
So young.
Very. And our sources say this loss left a huge mark on her. It gave her a profound sense of the fleetingness of earthly things.
I can imagine that experience must have really shaped her.
It did. And this family tragedy was actually what led them to move. They relocated to Dijon and remarkably settled very close to the Carmelite convent that would eventually become her spiritual home.
Wow. So that experience of loss at such a young age, it must have deeply affected her view of the world, of earthly attachments.
Undoubtedly. But what's also really captivating and maybe, relatable about young Elizabeth is her personality.
Yeah.
She definitely wasn't born a quiet, placid little saint.
Oh, really?
Quite the opposite. The biographies describe her as precocious, lively, and having this famously fiery, flashing, even terrible temper.
Uh-huh.
Apparently so. Her mother, maybe with a mix of, frustration and foresight, famously said to her, "You will either be a terror or a saint."
Wow, imagine hearing that as a kid. That's quite a prophecy.
It's a powerful statement, isn't it? It sort of frames the radical choice she had. And what's amazing is how this child, with such an intense nature, started her journey towards sainthood.
So what was the turning point?
Our sources all point to her first communion, April 19th, 1891. That was the pivotal moment, a genuine conversion experience for her.
How so?
Well, she confided to a friend afterwards, and this shows incredible spiritual maturity for a child. She said, "I am not hungry. Jesus has fed me."
Wow. That speaks volumes, an immediate, deep spiritual impact. Nourishment beyond the physical.
Exactly. And it wasn't just a fleeting feeling. From that point on, apparently, her temper did noticeably calm down.
So that immense energy she had.
The energy that once fueled those rages, yes, it was gradually, through grace, channeled and redirected.
Towards what?
It transformed into what's described as an iron will for holiness, and a passionate, really single-minded love for God.
Now that, for me, is a crucial aha moment for anyone listening. It shows so clearly that grace doesn't just wipe out our personality or our strong passions.
Right. It doesn't erase who we are.
No. It purifies them, redirects them. It offers so much hope, I think, for anyone wrestling with their own strong temperament or intense emotions. Your strengths, your passion itself, can be sanctified, not squashed. They can become these powerful engines for spiritual growth.
It's a really profound reframing.
Yeah.
And the synchronicities in her life, they just keep coming. On the very same day as her first communion.
The same day?
Yes. She visited the Carmel of Dijon. It feels almost divinely timed. And our sources say the prioress there explained something crucial to her.
What was that?
That her name, Elizabeth, actually means house of God, Maison de Dieu in Hebrew.
Whoa, on the day of her first communion, that's incredible. A deeply personal revelation on such a significant day.
Precisely. And this insight became the central key, the interpretive lens, for her entire spiritual life.
How so?
It took the doctrine of the indwelling Trinity, the belief that God, Father, Son, Holy Spirit truly lives within the baptized soul, which can seem abstract.
Yeah, it can feel distant sometimes.
Right. But for her, this made it intensely living, deeply personal. It became her reality, her vocation. She realized she was, quite literally, meant to be a house of God.
That's powerful. And for the next decade, from 1891 to 1901, she lived what our sources call a contemplative in the world.
Which really pushes back against the stereotype of mystics, doesn't it? She wasn't hiding away.
Not at all. In fact, she was this incredibly accomplished musician, a prize-winning concert-level pianist, studied at the Dijon Conservatory from age 8, practiced up to 5 hours a day.
Yeah, apparently she could play some really challenging Chopin pieces. She had serious talent.
Enough for a professional career, surely.
Oh, definitely. But she increasingly saw her music differently. Not as a way to get worldly acclaim, but as a form of prayer. Something played only for God.
So even then, her growing interior life was starting to infuse and transform her outward talents, directing them Godward.
Exactly. And she also had a vibrant social life, which I think is really striking and important for us today.
In what way?
Well, she enjoyed parties. She had deep friendships. She even kept up with the latest fashions.
That's amazing. It's such a strong counter-narrative to the idea that a deep interior life means you have to pull away from the world.
Absolutely. It shows so clearly that deep spiritual connection is not incompatible with worldly engagement. You don't have to become a hermit to find God. He's right there, truly present, in the middle of your daily life.
And her faith wasn't just internal either, was it?
Far from it. Our sources highlight her very active apostolate. She taught catechism to the children of factory workers, ran a youth club, sang in the parish choir. Apparently she had a beautiful voice.
Wow, she was busy.
And she regularly visited the sick. She was fully immersed in her parish and community, actively living out her faith through service.
But despite all this activity, this engagement with the world, the desire for Carmel was always there.
It seems so.
Yep.
Present from as early as age 7, apparently. It intensified so much that she made a private vow of virginity when she was just 14.
14. But she didn't enter then.
No, there was a big obstacle. Her mother was strongly opposed. really didn't want her to go.
Ah, the human element.
Exactly. And this forced her to wait until she turned 21.
So that decade of waiting.
That decade of living her vowed life in the world, yes. It turned out to be this crucial lesson in patience, in fidelity. It taught her how to live her vocation right there, in the midst of ordinary lay life, not just dreaming of the cloister.
Proving that holiness isn't tied to a specific place or state in life.
Precisely. And during this time, she was also one of the very first people to read Saint Therese of Lisieux's autobiography, Story of a Soul, which had just been published.
And that resonated with her.
Deeply. It powerfully confirmed her own path of confidence and trust in God. Plus, she received really important spiritual direction from a Dominican priest, Père Vallet.
What did he help with?
He helped give a solid doctrinal structure, a theological language, to her intuitive sense of the indwelling Trinity. He helped her articulate that profound inner experience.
Which brings us then to her life within the walls of Carmel, from 1901 to 1906.
Right, August 6, 1901. After finally getting her mother's reluctant okay, Elizabeth entered the Carmel of Dijon.
And she was happy.
Overjoyed. Her words were, "I can't find words to express my happiness. Here there is no longer anything but God." It sounds like she felt she'd truly come home.
It does. And then she received the habit.
Yes, she got the Carmelite habit and her religious name, Sister Elizabeth of the Trinity, on December 8, 1901, and made her final profession, giving her whole life to God on January 11, 1903.
Now, it's important to note you said her external life in the convent was ordinary.
Yeah, remarkably so. It wasn't filled with, dramatic visions or ecstasies like some saints' lives. Hers was marked by faithfulness to the common life, the daily rhythm of prayer, work, community.
So her real journey was internal.
Deeply internal. She just immersed herself in Scripture, especially of St. Paul, whose theology really shaped her understanding, and also in the mystical writings of St. John of the Cross. His work helped her navigate the deeper waters of the spiritual journey.
But her time in Carmel, even though it seemed peaceful inside, wasn't entirely free from external pressures, right?
No, definitely not. Our sources mention this constant shadow of exile.
What was that about?
The French government at the time, early 20th century, had these secularization laws. They were actively suppressing religious orders, forcing thousands of monks and nuns out of the country.
So her community lived under that threat.
Constantly. The Carmel of Dijon, like many others, faced the real possibility of being shut down, disbanded. They even had contingency plans to flee, maybe to Belgium or Switzerland.
Wow. That constant uncertainty.
It likely deepened her understanding, don't you think? That the soul is the only truly permanent home of the Trinity. External circumstances might change, you might be displaced, but that inner sanctuary, that house of God within, that can't be touched by laws or governments.
That's a powerful insight born from difficult circumstances. And then her journey takes another turn, a really profound and, well, heart-wrenching one.
Yes. Around 1903, Elizabeth started showing symptoms of Addison's disease. Incurable back then.
How long did the illness last?
It progressed relentlessly over 3 years. Intense, chronic suffering. A slow, agonizing process leading to her death in 1906.
But this period of pain, this physical decline, it became the very crucible for her spiritual teaching.
Exactly. It's this stark paradox. As her physical world literally shrank to the confines of her infirmary room, as her body wasted away, her spiritual vision, her influence actually expanded, universally.
So she didn't see the illness as like an interruption to her calling.
Not at all. She saw it as its consummation, its highest expression. She consciously chose to transform it into an apostolate of suffering.
What does that mean exactly?
Seeing her suffering as the ultimate way she could be united with Christ, her crucified for love spouse, as she called him. It wasn't just passive endurance, it was active, loving participation in his suffering for the world.
It's just astounding that during this time of intense physical limitation, she produced her most enduring spiritual writings.
It really is. She composed her famous prayer, "O my God, Trinity, whom I adore," in November 1904. People still pray it widely today.
And her retreats?
Yes, in her final months, August 1906, just before she died, she dictated her 2 great spiritual retreats, Heaven and Faith and Last Retreat. They're absolutely foundational for understanding her spirituality.
This radical reframing of suffering, seeing it not as pointless evil, but as a sacrament that gives us God, that's revolutionary, isn't it? Especially today when we try so hard to avoid all pain.
Incredibly revolutionary. It shows so powerfully that a spiritually fruitful life doesn't depend on external activity or perfect health or worldly success. It depends on deep inner union with God.
That offers so much hope, doesn't it? For the sick, the suffering, the elderly, anyone feeling limited by their circumstances. It reminds us that every life, every suffering, can be deeply meaningful in God.
Absolutely. And her commitment was so total that she actually refused pain relief in her final months. She wanted her offering to be complete, fully united with Christ on the cross.
And the name she gave her infirmary room,
Ah, yes, the Palace of Pain and Bliss.
it perfectly captures that Christian paradox, doesn't it? Finding joy and life right in the heart of the cross amidst the worst suffering.
She lived her theology right to the very end. She died on November 9, 1906. And her last words, they just summed it all up.
What were they?
I am going to light, to love, to life.
Oh,
It showed exactly where her focus was.
what an incredible life. Okay, so now that we've explored the rich ground of her experience, let's move into the framework of her spirituality itself.
Yes, let's look at the 5 interconnected pillars that form the structure of her profound yet accessible interior life.
Pillar 1, the foundation for everything else, the indwelling presence, what she called my heaven on earth.
Exactly. For Elizabeth, this wasn't just a theological idea you learn about. It was the central, lived reality shaping every moment.
The belief that the triune God Father, Son, Holy Spirit dwells by grace, truly, substantially, in the soul of every single baptized person.
Yes, and she felt this with profound conviction. This intimate personal presence was her heaven on earth because, as she said, heaven is God and God is in my soul. It's such a radical invitation to find the divine within, not somewhere else.
And this isn't just her personal feeling, it's deeply rooted in our faith, right? Our sources point this out clearly.
Absolutely. Think of Jesus' promise in John 14:23. Anyone who loves me will obey my teaching. My Father will love them, and we will come to them and make our home with them.
Make our home.
And then St. Paul in 1 Corinthians 3:16 asks every believer directly, don't you know that you are the temple of God and that the Spirit of God lives in you?
These aren't just dusty old texts for her. They were living truth.
Living reality. For Elizabeth, this indwelling is a direct gift of baptism. It became intensely personal for her when she learned her name meant house of God.
Right, that connection.
That deep, intimate, accessible presence of the Trinity became the source of all her spiritual practices. She saw the soul as this inhabited abyss, a deep space where God was already present, already at home.
So how do we practically tap into this heaven on earth? What was her advice?
She famously advised us to build a little cell in your soul and enter it from time to time.
Not a physical cell, obviously.
No, a spiritual exercise, a call to cultivate interior recollection, a constant loving awareness of this divine guest within. It's like having an inner sanctuary you can retreat to, anytime, anywhere, no matter what's going on outside.
A refuge from the busyness.
Exactly. And her famous prayer, "Oh my God, Trinity, whom I adore," really articulates this longing for communion. She prays, "Pacify my soul, make it your heaven, your beloved home and place of your repose. Let me never leave you there alone."
That's so intimate, not just reciting words.
No, it was a living conversation. She lived in such constant communion that she even referred to the Trinity affectionately as my three, like a nickname. It shows how personal her relationship was with the God inside her.
This really democratizes the whole idea of contemplative life, doesn't it?
Completely. By grounding it in baptism, Elizabeth makes it crystal clear. Deep prayer, intimate union with God, it's the inheritance of every Christian, not just monks or nuns. It's a universal birthright.
And the proof is who she wrote for, right?
Exactly. She wrote her key retreat, Heaven and Faith, not for her fellow nuns, but for her married sister, Marguerite, a young mother dealing with kids, daily life, all of it.
That's huge. It shows she truly believed this interior life wasn't dependent on being in a cloister or having lots of quiet time.
It can and must be lived right in the world, in the middle of family life, work, everything. Her spirituality is based on visions or special experiences, but simply on attention to the indwelling Trinity.
A reality available to all of us.
Absolutely. Which directly challenges that idea that spirituality means escaping the world. For Elizabeth, the world is precisely where you find and cultivate this inner heaven.
That's really powerful stuff. Which leads us nicely into the second pillar, the praise of glory, laudum gloriae.
Yes, this flows directly from the indwelling. If God in his Trinity truly lives within us.
Then our purpose, our very identity, is to be a praise of his glory.
Exactly. She took that phrase from St. Paul, from Ephesians, and made it her personal vocation, her life's mission, even the name she wanted in heaven.
So Ephesians chapter 1 is key here, where it says we were chosen to be holy and blameless before him in love. destined to be to the praise of his glory.
That's the heart of it. And the theologian M. Philippon helps us understand this with a useful distinction.
Between intrinsic and extrinsic glory.
Right. God's intrinsic glory is his own perfect inner life of love within the Trinity. It's complete in itself, like the sun's own light. Nothing we do can add to that.
Okay. So what's our role?
Our role, our calling, is to offer extrinsic glory. We do this not by adding to God, but by becoming a pure reflection of him.
Like a mirror.
Exactly. Like becoming a spotless mirror or a transparent crystal. So clear, so polished by grace, that God's own beauty and goodness can shine through us into the world. It's about becoming transparent to the divine light within.
And in her final writings, Elizabeth describes what this praise of glory soul looks like.
She does, beautifully. It's a soul living deeply in God, with pure disinterested love, completely surrendered to his will, not seeking its own agenda.
And she uses that image of a lyre.
Yes. Like a lyre under the mysterious touch of the Holy Spirit, meaning you become so attuned to God, so quiet in your own desires, that the Holy Spirit can just play divine harmonies through your life. Your actions, words, thoughts, even your breathing become this beautiful melody of praise.
Wow, a continuous spiritual song.
This soul just gazes on God in faith and simplicity, not looking for big experiences, just resting in his presence. It becomes like a bottomless abyss where God can just flow in and expand.
Capable of receiving more and more of God.
And crucially, it's a soul that is always giving thanks, a constant state of Eucharistia. So every act, every thought, every moment becomes an echo of the eternal Sanctus, a continuous holy, 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 joining the angels.
So this vocation, it transforms our entire life into a kind of living liturgy, an uninterrupted song of praise starting right now.
That's it. And our sources say every event, good or bad, joy or sorrow, success or failure, is received as a sacrament that gives God to the soul.
That changes everything, doesn't it? No moment is wasted. Every single thing can be offered back as praise.
And to nurture that inner song, that praise, we need the third pillar, interior silence, the place of encounter.
Now, for Elizabeth, silence isn't just quietness.
No, it's not a void, not just the absence of noise, which is how we often think of it. For her, it's a positive, sacred space. It's the essential condition for actually encountering the indwelling God.
And for hearing the word that he speaks eternally in the soul.
Exactly. She's definitely drawing on her Carmelite roots here, especially St. John of the Cross.
Who said, the Father spoke one word. This word he speaks in eternal silence, and in silence must it be heard by the soul.
Precisely. So silence isn't empty. It's full of God's loving presence.
Which reframes silence completely. It's not passive discipline. It's active, loving attention.
Yes. The reason you seek silence isn't to empty yourself, but because someone is there. You're silent for the other, for the Trinity within. As Elizabeth wrote so simply, if he did not fill our cells in our cloisters, how empty they would be.
That's a world away from secular meditation, focused just on calming down or emptying the mind.
Totally different. For Elizabeth, the goal isn't emptiness, it's fullness. Deep, loving communion with the Trinity. A holy, simple, and loving movement towards God.
So practically, how do we cultivate this in our crazy, noisy lives? She talked about levels of silence.
She did. First, seeking external silence when possible. Her Carmelite cell was an example which helps foster interior silence.
Which means?
Quieting the inner noise, the restless passions, anxieties, desires, ordering them harmoniously towards God, stillness inside.
And that opens the door to
divine silence. The gift of infused contemplation, where God communicates himself directly beyond words or ideas.
And the core practice for getting there is recollection.
Recollection, deliberately pulling back from external distractions and internal self-chatter, just to be present to God within. Her own mission, she felt, was to draw souls by helping them to go out of themselves, and to keep them in this great silence, within which will allow God to imprint himself on them and to transform them into himself.
Her own prayer sounds so simple. I am silent, I listen to him. It is so good to hear everything he has to say.
Beautiful, isn't it? Just being receptive.
For us, living today in this constantly plugged-in world, she gives such a compelling, urgent reason to seek silence. It's the space where the most vital relationship we have with God is actually nurtured.
If we don't make that space, we risk missing him completely.
Which brings us to the fourth pillar, a challenging one, redemptive suffering, the crucified spouse.
Yes. As we saw in her life story, Elizabeth didn't just put up with her agonizing illness. She actively embraced it, even welcomed it.
Why?
As the primary way she could achieve union with Christ. And as a fruitful apostolate, a way of helping the church through her suffering. This wasn't mere stoicism. It was fueled by love.
And this view of suffering is deeply scriptural, isn't it? Rooted in St. Paul.
Very much so. Paul's desire in Philippians 3:10 to be conformed to Christ in his death. And even more strikingly, Colossians 1:24.
Where he says, "In my flesh I am filling up what is lacking in the afflictions of Christ on behalf of his body, which is the church." That implies we have a role to play.
A profound co-redemptive role, yes. Elizabeth deeply desired to become for Christ an extra added humanity in which he can renew all his mystery.
Wow. Her suffering body as a place for Christ's redemptive work to continue.
That's how she saw it. Her focus wasn't on the pain itself, the agony, but on the immense love behind the cross. That's why she prayed to, "O my beloved Christ, crucified for love."
So the illness wasn't a tragedy for her.
No. She saw it, incredibly, as the greatest pledge of love God could give her. A gift allowing her to unite with him more intimately than ever before.
And this perspective allowed her to turn her suffering into praise.
Exactly. Remember the lyre of the soul? She said, suffering is a string that produces still more beautiful sounds. Her pain, which could have been crushing, became this invisible liturgy, an offering of praise, a constant sanctus.
And she was so committed she even refused painkillers.
In her final months, yes. She wanted her offering to be complete, totally united with Christ's sacrifice. And that name for her room, the Palace of Pain and Bliss, just captures it perfectly. That Christian paradox, finding joy, meaning, life, right in the heart of the cross, even in agony.
It really challenges our modern avoidance of suffering. It offers a radical path to spiritual fruitfulness we often miss.
It truly does.
And finally, the fifth pillar, the Marian and ecclesial dimension, the gate of heaven, Mary's role in her spirituality.
Yes. For Elizabeth, Mary isn't just someone to pray to. She's the perfect human model, the archetypes of this interior life we've been discussing.
How so?
Mary is the embodiment of the soul living in silent, loving adoration of the indwelling God. Elizabeth saw her as the first praise of glory, the supreme example of a soul transparent to God's light. And she loved calling her the gate of heaven, Genua Coeli.
And this is rooted in Scripture too, Luke's Gospel.
Deeply. Especially Luke 2:1 and 51. The Virgin kept all these things in her heart. For Elizabeth, Mary's whole life, though outwardly ordinary, was lived from this deep, hidden interior space. Constant communion with the Word, Jesus, whom she carried, nurtured, adored within her.
She even pointed to the time between the Annunciation and Christmas.
Yes, those hidden 9 months when Mary carried Jesus, appearing ordinary on the outside. Elizabeth saw that as the supreme model for all interior souls, especially those in the world. Mary, the humble adorer of the gift of God, teaching us how to live hidden adoration amidst daily tasks.
And this inner reality, carrying the Word, it fueled her actions.
It divinized them, Elizabeth would say, like her journey to help her cousin Elizabeth. He shows deep contemplation doesn't hinder active love, it empowers it. The inner life fuels the outer.
And that title, Genua Coeli, Gate of Heaven.
Elizabeth loved it. She pictured Mary standing at the soul's entrance, gently opening the way into the mystery of the indwelling Trinity.
And she kept a statue nearby during her illness.
Yes, a statue of Mary under that title, guarding the door of her symbolic citadel of suffering, reminding her Mary was ushering her deeper into God's mystery.
So Mary, as Mother of Grace,
she helps mold our souls into the image of Christ, who is himself the perfect praise of his Father's glory. So Mary helps us become living praises of glory too. It all connects beautifully.
It really does. Okay, now that we've explored these pillars, it's really interesting to see how Elizabeth's unique voice fits within the wider Carmelite tradition, especially alongside her famous contemporary, Saint Thérèse of Lisieux.
Right, delving into that dialogue with Thérèse, it's important to remember, yes, they were contemporaries in French Carmel, but they never actually met.
But Elizabeth read Thérèse's book.
Oh yes, she was deeply moved by Story of a Soul. She found Thérèse's little way, that path of spiritual childhood and confidence, a powerful confirmation of the path she herself was already sensing.
Our sources really stress they're complementary, not opposed, right?
Absolutely. Think of them not as rivals, but as offering two distinct yet equally beautiful and valid perspectives on the journey to God. Different paths up the same mountain.
So what's the main difference?
Well, it really lies in their theological starting points and how they express things. Thérèse's spirituality is intensely Christocentric, focused on Jesus, the child Jesus, the holy face. Her language is very effective, relational, drawing a lot from the Gospels and Isaiah's tender imagery. Her little way is all about childlike trust in Jesus.
Okay, and Elizabeth?
Elizabeth's approach is explicitly, systematically Trinitarian. Her whole teaching, everything we've talked about, unfolds directly from the mystery of the three persons dwelling within the soul.
Which leads to a different scriptural focus.
Exactly. Much more Pauline and Johannine. Ephesians 1, John 14-17 passages highlighting the indwelling Trinity. Her key concepts, like Laudum Gloriae, come straight from Paul.
Does this create a different tone, a different language?
It does. Therese's language often feels gentle, intimate, almost domestic sometimes. Elizabeth's is more theological, more expansive, even bolder. She uses words like abyss, immensity, devouring fire.
Reflecting her engagement with Paul and maybe those Rhineland mystics.
Precisely. They had that daring, experiential approach to God's presence in the soul.
Even their ideas about their mission in heaven were different, weren't they?
Yeah. Therese famously promised her shower of roses, spending heaven doing good on earth. Elizabeth envisioned something more hidden, more internal, to draw souls into this great silence within, helping foster that communion with the Trinity.
So how do they complement each other?
Well, you could say Therese teaches us how to approach God like a trusting child, through littleness and confidence. Elizabeth then gives us the map of the Trinitarian palace we enter once that door is open. She focuses on the reality, the being, of our soul's participation in God's own life.
So Therese opens the door of the heart.
And Elizabeth describes the incredible divine mystery that fills it, showing us how to live in that mystery. Both are essential.
Okay, so bringing this all home, what does this mean for us, for you listening, trying to navigate life today? This final part, living Elizabeth's message in a frenetic age. How can we actually apply this stuff?
Because her teaching isn't just for admiring, it's for doing. It offers a really clear, accessible roadmap for cultivating a deep interior life, right here, amidst all the noise and demands of our modern world. It's a countercultural path, really.
So principle 1, cultivating awareness of the presence.
This is foundational. The practice of recollection, just creating short, frequent pauses in your day, simply to remember, He is there. God is within you, always.
It's about being mindful that God is in us in the most intimate way, and then trying to go about everything with Him.
Exactly. Think about it, ordinary things. Driving, emails, laundry, waiting in line. These can become little cues, little reminders to enter the cell, to just inwardly acknowledge the indwelling God.
Turning mundane moments into divine encounters, infusing the whole day with presence.
That's the idea. Principle 2, making silence into communion.
This means setting aside some dedicated time.
Even just a few minutes, maybe morning and night, for wordless, loving attentiveness before God.
The goal isn't necessarily saying prayers.
Not in the sense of just reciting words, no. The goal is simply to be with the one who dwells within, creating that intentional space for God in silence.
Letting go of the mental clutter, the to-do lists, the worries.
Letting go of self-occupation, yeah. And just allowing God the space to work, His transforming grace in you. It's an act of loving surrender. Just being in His presence, open to His silent love.
Principle 3, often the hardest. Offering suffering as praise.
Yes. When you face any kind of suffering, physical pain, emotional heartache, work problems, frustrating situations, even small annoyances, Elizabeth invites you to consciously unite that cross with Christ's passion.
And then offer it.
Offer it actively, for the needs of the church, for the world, for specific intentions, seeing every trial not as meaningless bad luck, but as that sacrament that gives us God, a unique chance for deeper union.
This changes it from something passive you endure
into an active, invisible liturgy, drawing spiritual fruit from difficulty, making your suffering redemptive for others. Imagine the power in realizing your pain can become a prayer.
Wow. And finally, principle 4, praying with her words.
A very concrete way in, engaging in that slow, meditative reading, Lectio Divina, of her key writings.
The 2 retreats, Heaven and Faith and Last Retreat, and the prayer to the Trinity.
Yes. And ideally, pray them with the Bible open to her key scriptures, Ephesians 1, John 14-17. See how the Word became living truth for her.
See how it can for you too. And you mentioned resources for that.
Yeah, things like the Beginning to Pray podcast series can offer a good structure for that kind of meditative reading.
Perfect. And for listeners who really want to dive deeper after this?
There are great resources. For serious study, The Complete Works, volumes 1-3 from ICS Publications. That has everything, letters, retreats, poems.
And for a more accessible start?
He is My Heaven by Jennifer Moorcroft, also ICS. A shorter, really readable, spiritually rich biography. Great introduction.
What about a deeper theological look?
Elizabeth of the Trinity. A Life of Praise to God by Senior Giovanna Della Croce, OCD from Sophia Institute Press. That really unpacks the praise of glory, vocation, its biblical roots. Very thorough.
And audio options.
Carmelcast, again from ICS, has a whole series on her life and themes like silence, suffering, etc. And Dr. Anthony Lills has some excellent in-depth lectures on discerning hearts, great for analysis and practical application.
Fantastic. So wrapping this all up, St. Elizabeth of the Trinity, despite her short, hidden life, gives us this incredibly compact, scripturally rich, deeply Trinitarian roadmap for the inner life.
Yeah, her message, born in Carmelite silence, forged in intense suffering. It feels like such a powerful antidote to the noise and, frankly, the superficiality of our age.
Yeah.
The call to find God not out there somewhere, but right in here.
By trying to live these pillars, presence, praise, silence, suffering, Marian receptivity, every Christian right now can discover that heaven already begun deep in their own heart. It's accessible now.
She really teaches us it's possible to transform a life that feels fragmented and distracted into a true sanctuary for the indwelling God. Her mission, she said, was to draw souls by helping them to go out of themselves in order to cling to God.
And that mission continues through her writings, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It's this universal invitation to you listening to find your true home, your deepest identity in that inhabited abyss of the soul, that sacred space where the Trinity's always waiting to be loved, known, glorified.
So as you go about your day today, maybe after listening to this, consider just one small step from her practical roadmap. What if you took just 5 minutes? 5 minutes of conscious, intentional silence, maybe even during a busy task, just inwardly nodding to the one within.
Or chose just one moment to remember, He is here, whatever you're doing.
What might change? What shifts might start happening if you truly began to live even a little more as a house of God? It's not about huge gestures, is it? It's about those small interior shifts.
Profound, transformative shifts. Remember, this journey, though incredibly deep, is truly accessible. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into Elizabeth's powerful, timeless, and I think incredibly timely message.